And thanks everybody for joining us today. My name is Jason Sidman. I'm the Director of Partnership Relations in the PhD network here at Northeastern University. I've been here for about a year and a half. My PhD is in psychology, and then I worked in industry for 15 years. And so coming to Northeastern was really a natural fit because I found that Northeastern uniquely understands the relationship between doctoral education and work that can be done in the research community, including government, nonprofits, and industry partners. It comes very naturally here. And so I joined for that reason into the PhD network, and we are sponsoring today's event because there's some really groundbreaking work that's happening in our experiential PhD and experiential postdoc programs that we'd like to share. Just to unpack that term for a minute, what do we mean by experiential PhD or experiential postdoc? As most of you know, Northeastern is really known for its co-op program, which we've had for over 100 years. And the reason we have that is because the learning model here at the university, the way that we think people learn best, is experiential learning, that people learn not only in the classroom and in the university, but in the world as well, and for our partners, vice versa. So experiential PhD and experiential postdoc are our opportunities to extend that learning model to the PhD and postdoc level. We have a couple of programs in particular that we utilize that I'm going to show you for about 30 seconds here. One is an opportunity for our full-time students to be able to engage in research at partner sites. And the other is the opportunity for employees at our partner sites who have master's degrees to be able to get their PhD from Northeastern. The first program is called Leaders, in which our PhD students receive professional training in addition to their scientific and technical training, and then conduct a research project that's jointly and collaboratively designed between Northeastern and the partner. It's like an internship in some ways, but this is, no kidding, high-level doctoral research intended to really solve a challenging problem for the partner and to advance the science that we're studying here at Northeastern. The other program for master's level employees to get their PhD from Northeastern is called Industry PhD. And this program is very unique in the US. This type of model is much more common in Europe, but this is a very unique program that allows employees to continue to work full-time while earning their PhD at Northeastern. They have advisors both from Northeastern and from the company. The projects are collaboratively designed. And these are both newer programs, but really growing rapidly, because I think we found a nice sweet spot in how to collaborate with our partners. We understand that these can be used for workforce development for both of them, for serving as a pipeline of our students to help develop their workforce, but also opportunities to reskill the workforce as well, and to upskill the workforce through our industry PhD program. We also have experiential postdoc, which is a similar model to industry PhD, but at the postdoc level. The panel that we have today is very interesting in its composition that way. We span all aspects of education here at Northeastern. Dr. Brigham Hyde of Eversana did his undergraduate work here. Dr. Husain Attarwala from Moderna was an industry PhD student here and is now a co-advisor for an experiential postdoc. And Dr. Vincent Isabella of Synlogic did his postdoc work here and is now an industry PhD advisor for an employee of his who's getting his PhD in our biology department. It only makes sense then that our moderator today is Dr. Mansoor Amiji, a professor in our pharmaceutical sciences and chemical engineering departments, who has really pioneered a lot of these experiential programs, is involved in all of them and more, and also an expert here in his field. And so this is a great group here to talk about how they're solving some of the biggest challenges in healthcare. So with that, Mansoor, I'll hand it over to you.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Jason, for that wonderful introduction to the Experiential PhD and Postdoc program. And so it is my pleasure to moderate this panel. And as Jason said, we have an incredible group of alum who are participating. So let me begin by simply asking them to introduce themselves first and what role they have in the various companies that they're affiliated with. We'll start with Dr. Hussein Attarwala. Hussein? Unmute yourself, Hussein.
Thank you, Dr. Amiji and Jason, for a nice introduction. And thank you for having me here. And good afternoon, everyone. So I'm Hussein Attarwala. I'm head of clinical pharmacology and pharmacometrics at Moderna Therapeutics. I have been at Moderna since last couple of years. And before joining Moderna, I was at Alumni Pharmaceuticals, where I was in the clinical pharm and pharmacometrics team, developing PK/PD models and guiding dose selection in clinical trials. While at Alumni Pharmaceuticals, I had the opportunity to do the industrial PhD at Northeastern under Dr. Amiji. And it was a wonderful experience to go through that program while also gaining industry experience where you could tackle real world challenges and also work on some cutting edge research in academia. So that really helped my career to progress further. And the program is one of the real springboard, I would say, to my career that provided the uplift. Yeah. And before joining Alumni or North PhD program, I was a student in Dr. Mansoor Amiji's lab doing my MS, where I did thesis work. Everything was on nucleic acid delivery and modeling and quantification that was very relevant to what you would expect in industry. So these collaborations are such that they are very relevant to the real world problems that are out there, and how do we prepare students to solve those problems, and then leads to such examples that we have here. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Hussein. Our next panelist is Dr. Brigham Hyde. He's at a company called Eversana, working specifically on data analytics and specifically an expert in artificial intelligence, machine learning. Brigham.
Yeah, thanks for having me, and glad to be with this group. You know, I started at Northeastern as a chemist, so somehow became a data scientist out of that. But I think it's actually, you know, related to the way that the field has evolved. I have a PhD in clinical pharmacology, like you're saying. That really got me into looking at clinical data, designing clinical trials and things of that nature. And the thing I realized early on was that a lot of the techniques you might use in those classical areas or skills you might have learned about mathematical modeling, you know, through these various disciplines, were really applicable to looking at data in the real world. And there's been a real surge in the use of what we call real world data in healthcare, whether it's EMR data or claims or genomics, and increasingly even social determinants of health. So I've built a career in a business at Eversana around that, and get to, you know, do really interesting work trying to predict outcomes for patients, trying to identify patient populations that have treatment opportunities, and help access and reach those populations, both for clinical trials and to support them with medications. It's kind of a cool experience to go from, you know, the bench where we might be manufacturing or synthesizing compounds, creating these drugs, and actually find out what it takes to help them succeed in the world. And, you know, I think there's lots of exciting areas happening up and down pharmaceutical development and really across healthcare and life sciences to leverage data to make better decisions. I think we're still kind of in the first couple innings of that process. And excited about where that can go. At Eversana, you know, we're a large conglomerate that focuses on life science companies. We provide services and support to manufacturers and med device companies. And right now I have a team of, over 150 data scientists that work with us, coming from all kinds of backgrounds. Some are PhDs in life science areas like me, some are computer science degrees. But really the common thread in our team, which I think is something that this program drives forward, is around curiosity. Anybody who works in data is trying to find answers to things and help solve problems. And that's the greatest skill you can have, I think. I'll pause there.
Thank you, Brigham. Our third panelist is Dr. Vincent Isabella, and Vincent is with a company called Synlogic. And so Vincent, just a brief introduction, and then we'll jump into some of the questions as well.
Absolutely, thank you. So I'm Vincent Isabella. I got my PhD at the University of Rochester in 2009, and my first sort of relationship with Northeastern came about when I did a postdoctoral fellowship with Kim Lewis in the Kim Lewis Lab in the Antimicrobial Discovery Center. And so that was a really great experience that I had. The amount of networking that goes on really was my first. It was a springboard that allowed me to move into industry in the first place. I moved from Kim's lab to AstraZeneca, spent a couple years there working mostly on antibiotic research. But the last 7 years of my career, I moved to this small company called Synlogic Therapeutics. And I was actually the third employee, the third Synlogic employee, and we're a company of almost 100 people. And my role there is I lead a group of synthetic biologists that design and genetically engineer probiotic bacteria that are meant to treat human disease. So we engineer probiotics to consume toxic molecules from within the human GI tract, or to secrete beneficial molecules to treat human disease. And so it's been a really rewarding experience at Synlogic, going from such a small company all the way to where we are now, where we have 3 clinical trials where we've put these engineered probiotic organisms into human patients. And this is a pretty new treatment modality. So there's a lot we've had to learn along the way. There's a lot that we've had to discuss with the FDA. How do you manage when you're putting in to a human body something that's sort of completely novel? And it's been rewarding that since the time I left Northeastern, I, as Jason alluded to, am now an advisor for an industry PhD in Kim's lab. So it's been rewarding to first be sort of a student of Kim, and now to be with him mentoring a new student and helping them get their jumping off point into furthering their career through this industry PhD program. So
Great.
I will pause there.
Yeah, thank you, Vincent. So we will start with some questions, and generally, each of you very, very proud to see our alums contributing so much to the development of healthcare in the United States and around the globe. And as you heard from the introductory remarks, each of the panelists is in specific area and contributing to the development of these types of molecules, or understanding of clinical trials and how to move these ideas towards translation. We'll start with Hussein and specifically Moderna's effort in right now, as we are still dealing with some of the issues with pandemic and trying to overcome. Moderna is considered one of the 2 companies that led to the development of mRNA vaccines. So Hussein, maybe a brief introduction to the Moderna technology, the mRNA, and how you are involved in terms of the vaccine development, but also broadly, how do you see Moderna's effort moving forward in the whole mRNA field?
Yeah, so just a brief introduction of the mRNA technology, which now does not really need much of an introduction because it is quite widely known. So what we do is we encapsulate mRNA within a lipid nanoparticle and administer to the body. and the body makes the protein that is encoded by the mRNA. And depending on what protein is made or what disease areas we're targeting, we would expect efficacy of that protein. And the type of diseases that we can treat or conditions is really very wide, because proteins are involved in almost every processes in the body, and most of the diseases have something that is upregulated or downregulated that we can correct with by correcting the amount or levels or introducing a new protein. So with this basic mechanism, which we call software of life, mRNA, we can go in therapeutic areas such as rare diseases, oncology, infectious diseases, and see where there is high unmet medical need and where we can have a tremendous impact in impacting the lives of patients who are suffering from these diseases. In case of vaccines, we can encode the antigen that is present on the virus that can elicit an immune response. We have algorithms to find out what is the right antigen that we need to encode, optimize that, and then give them in this delivery system, and then see what kind of immunogenicity we get. And with our COVID vaccine, as all of you know, we have very nice efficacy and really impacting the entire world to come back to normal life. In terms of my involvement, my department, I lead the clin pharm and pharmacometrics function. So the key aspect of my role and my team is determining what is the dose that is optimal. And if you look at the clinical trial success rates or failure rates, the most determining factor is whether the dose was too little or too high. Was the dose efficacious or and safe enough? If we miss the dose, either too low or too high, then we can miss that balance of safety and efficacy, which is extremely important when we want to have a therapeutic to be in the therapeutic index for the large population that the drug is going to be administered. So in my team, we do all kind of mathematical modeling, starting from uh, quantitative pharmacology models, from translational models to population PK models, population PK/PD models, safety evaluation, safety probabilistic models, and tie the aggregate information that is there across phases of drug development to make informed decision on what and how we should proceed to next steps. So for therapeutics, these are the models, and then for vaccines, we have something called immunostimulatory, immunodynamic models that we put into play, and along with the safety models, then what is the optimal dose? So yeah, so that is our involvement there across all therapeutic areas, across the vaccines at Moderna. Yeah.
Great. Thanks. So Vincent, I'm going to come to you next and ask, Synlogic, you briefly touched upon the concept of developing microbes or bacteria that specifically can serve as therapeutics in trying to treat diseases. I know Synlogic has a program in phenylketonuria, or commonly abbreviated as PKU, as well as looking at uric acid accumulation and potentially treatment of kidney stones and other ailments. Maybe you can touch upon the technology itself, and then how this program is evolving. What are some of the interesting features of the Synlogic technology?
Absolutely. One of the programs that we've been working on since the beginning of, since the company's inception, is phenylketonuria. So patients that have phenylketonuria can't break down a particular amino acid, phenylalanine. And because of that, phenylalanine can build up to neurotoxic levels. So it can be pretty bad news for people that can't get rid of phenylalanine that they consume from the diet. So what we've done in my group, the synthetic biology group, is we've genetically modified a probiotic strain of E. coli Nissl. So E. coli Nissl is this probiotic that's available over the counter in many countries, not the United States just yet, but it's got a pretty strong safety history because of its use for nearly 100 years now. So we've taken that strain as our chassis, as we've called it, and modified it to be able to consume phenylalanine into non-toxic products. So phenylalanine can be found in high abundance in the GI tract, even regardless of the diet. It seems to accumulate there. It's one of a couple amino acids that, for reasons that'll probably take too long to explain, but there's a recirculation of phenylalanine so that there's a pool of it available within the GI tract. So patients can take our engineered bacteria, and our bacteria will take and consume the phenylalanine from the diet or from that which has been recirculated back into the GI tract. It converts that into non-toxic products, which luckily we can track quantitatively through the excretion product in the urine, and ultimately lower their phenylalanine plasma levels. And so this is a pretty non-invasive sort of treatment as well, because there is an unmet need in PKU for novel therapeutics, and especially those that are oral and that have low risk for systemic toxicity. There is a new drug on the market now, which is a pegylated form of a phenylalanine degrading enzyme. But the problem with that particular treatment is it's not really amenable for treatment of the pediatric population, as well as there's been a lot of reports of immune site reactions and systemic toxicity. So we think we have a really great treatment option for pediatrics and just for non-invasive treatment. We have similar programs in enteric hyperoxaluria. So this is a disease where patients have an accumulation of a compound called oxalate, and that can lead to kidney stones. Uric acid is another area that we're interested in going after. Same idea. Uric acid accumulates in the GI tract, and its absorption can lead to kidney stones. So these are common sort of things that we go after, that if we think that there's a toxic substance that can be intercepted from within the GI tract, that's something that we can think about converting into a therapeutic option. And so because there really hasn't been many engineered bacteria brought into human clinical trials, it's been a learning experience in our interactions with the FDA. So for those of you that might not know, one of the things that you have to do to clear a batch of drug product to make it available to go into human patients is something called USP 61. And so that you have to show that there's no E. coli or in your actual drug product. So you can imagine that when your drug product is E. coli, that presents a challenge. So we've had a lot of unique interactions with the FDA, and it's been sort of a learning experience for both of us on both ends to see, what is it that they'll allow us to do? How will they allow us to modify the standard way that therapeutics have been approached in the past to be able to fit something like what we do into the mainstream and get these into human patients. And it has been successful because, as I mentioned before, we are currently in 3 human clinical trials as we speak.
Great. Excellent. So Brigham, data is so critical in healthcare, and we are seeing the analysis of data and mining of data basically permeate through all aspects, from the discovery of drugs to development to clinical trials to post-clinical trial, and what is called pharmacovigilance. And your involvement in drug development efforts and how Eversana and your role there has contributed specifically to some of these understanding, and maybe you can shed some light on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think both my colleagues here mentioned, sort of a fast changing regulatory environment on a number of fronts, both, new modalities, obviously the acceleration of approvals during COVID, and, data and what's going on our front with regulatory is also getting really exciting. So one of the areas that we're spending a lot of time on now is something called synthetic controls. and the use of real world data as a sort of an adjunct to the classic standard of clinical trials. So clinical trials, gold standard, what we've used now for 50 to 100 years to make decisions about medications, what regulators look at, but they're not perfect for a couple of reasons. One, they tend to, enroll certain populations more than others demographically, also tend to be run on healthier patients overall that may not always represent, what the patients in the real world are going to look like. It has some of the biases of, a trial which is run in a certain way. And they're expensive and they take a long time. One of the reasons why it takes us so long to develop drugs and new therapies classically is just the recruitment, management, analysis. These trials can take a significant amount of time. So what's begun over really the last kind of 5 years, starting with companies like Flatiron Health, also another company that I founded called Concert AI in the oncology real world data space. And what we continue to do now at Eversana is take data from the real world and get it to certain standards we call regulatory grade standards to replicate what's going on in a classic control trial, but replicate it in real world data. So actually look at the patients who might be taking the active comparator in the real world and see how that compares. There's a lot of data work involved in that. There's also a lot of important statistical approaches required to do that sort of comparison between trial data and real world data, but it has big advantages. And when you talk to the regulators, they're getting a view on patients actually out in the real world, how these drugs are performing, which increases the diversity of the populations they're able to look at. It gives them a better line of sight on how a new drug they might approve might actually look in the real world. And when it hits, for instance, comorbid patients, which are often excluded from trials. And bottom line is, you can run a synthetic control in a few months as opposed to a year or multiple years that it takes to do it in clinical trials, and for much less cost. I think my side of the world on COVID and the impact of it has really accelerated this even further. I mean, if all of us have gotten used to looking at real world data on COVID, right? What's the latest rates, infection rates, vaccine rates? It's been a big year for my whole space because of that. But I think what will last is that you'll be able to leverage this data in more of a continuum, between control trials, which will remain the gold standard, and real world evidence, and be able to do that in more of a dynamic way to better understand how these therapies are going to work when they hit the market, and also identify subpopulations where they might work better than expected, or additional therapeutic opportunities might arise from those subpopulations. So that's been a big focus for us. There's a lot of investment that goes into creating those data assets and making them regulatory grade, but it can make drug development faster, cheaper. We can bring cures to more people more quickly, and we can do it with the patient's voice in mind and the real world perspective of what goes on with them.
Great. Yeah, so you touched upon a topic that I think resonates with every one of us here, and that's the impact of the pandemic. We all, from last year and even in the earlier part of this year, have been going through this, and obviously, one of the clear sense of the pandemic is that we are meeting through these virtual environments. And so I wanted to ask each one of you in terms of the companies, and I know in the case of Moderna, obviously there's a lot of emphasis on vaccine and vaccine efforts, but as we are going through the pandemic, what lessons have each of you learned, and what are some of the, from those lessons, ways that you are thinking about, from both in terms of your personal decision making, but also from the company, how these these lessons are leading to evolution in terms of the science that's going to move forward. So Hussein, maybe we can start with you again. What has the pandemic taught you in how, as we think about moving forward, ways that we can take some of these lessons and maybe improve upon?
Yeah. So one of the key things that came out of this pandemic was the pace of drug development that we have can be accelerated much more than what it is currently. So there are a lot of roadblocks that you need to go through when you go through drug development. And with this pandemic, agencies and everyone have figured out that what is absolutely needed and how can you accelerate things faster. So I hope that the entire science of how you develop drugs can be faster after this pandemic. And, you know, that is one aspect, because it takes forever to develop something which is a rare disease, or a disease that affects a few people. But if it affects so many people, then you do want to get things out fast. So the prime thing that was really pushed everything forward was involvement across the board. So regulatory agencies were reviewing faster. The technology has evolved such that it allows for um, faster bringing up of the sequences, for example, mRNA sequences, algorithms, all of those. So all components coming together in a way to accelerate drug development. And uh, mRNA technology was really a new technology, not a single vaccine out there. So it also speaks to 21st century uh, technological advancement. So if this pandemic happened a few years ago, then maybe this space wouldn't have been possible. So now we have AWS, where you can do very high speed computational analysis. We didn't have that kind of computers before. Uh, and also evolution of the delivery sciences. So as you would know, Dr. Amiji, you have been in delivery sciences since so many years. So scientists have developed these technologies since many years, but then it has evolved and progressed to a point where these methods are now employable in the real world. And this pandemic really pushed that yes, can you use these methods to make something that can impact the entire world? And it helped. Yeah. Uh, Other than in working in virtual environment, there we all would agree that there are a lot of things that can be done remotely that we thought that we need to go in office and get things done. And many of the even and apart from drug development, if even my doctor visit, which I used to sit there a half an hour wait, now can be virtual and I can just get done with that. So there is a lot of efficiency in our daily lives that we can see, we can build in why this wider adoption of virtual meetings or virtual um, trainings and trips in this space of education. There could be so much virtual education that can happen also without someone actually coming in. Yeah. So these are some quick thoughts, but of course I can think something more. Yeah.
Thank you, Hussein. So Vincent, same question, maybe in terms of your assessment of how the pandemic has, both in terms of some of the negatives, but also I think one of the things that I want to highlight here is what are the positives that you see, and Hussein touched upon a little bit about the accelerated pace of drug development. Maybe that could be something, and I think that nicely touch upon some of the efforts that Brigham is also working on, which is more on the data science and analytics. But from Synlogic perspective, your own personal perspective, so what are some of the things that you see happening because of the pandemic?
Well, I mean, I think first and foremost, as an industry, I think that it's shown remarkable resilience in the ability to keep things moving, even in the face of a pandemic. Some industries were not as lucky, obviously, but we all found ways to make it work. And I'd say, as a positive, like any company, at the beginning of the year, we set corporate goals, and a few months later in 2020, when the pandemic came to full swing, where we were understanding what was going on, there was a lot of concern about how can we ever continue on with this pandemic raging in the background. But like everyone else, we learned how to do things virtually. We learned how to make things more efficient. And I'm, I won't say I'm necessarily surprised, but I'm elated to find out that we hit all our corporate goals, even without planning for a pandemic when they were set forward. And so, I think that just underscores that we are a resilient industry, that we can adapt rapidly and be flexible to make things work. Also, Hussein brought up the efficiencies in general that we learned about only because this pandemic hit us. What things can be done virtually. What do you what really is the nice to have versus the need to have to push something through, to get your IND filed in time. The FDA has stayed on time with our meeting frequency, with our schedule, and that wasn't always clear that could be the case. There was something like 175 different vaccine programs going on at one point. How can we be sure that our metabolic disease, our small orphan diseases, can still be considered with everything else that the FDA has got going on? So, I think that we've found a lot of ways to just adapt, and I think that's been one positive to take away from all of this. The negative, obviously, it's just the obvious thing, is that we're a social creature and we want to be around each other, and it's been a challenge. We had to do things like implement split shifts, and we have to implement social distancing. People can't sit at the same table and even eat when they're on site. So that's been a struggle. I do think that virtual meetings have really been they've been a necessity, and they are great. But there's something to be said for having everybody in the same room, having that whiteboard available when you're talking science, being able to draw stuff out and everybody's there focused with their eyes on it. That's one thing that I think is a little bit lacking with the virtual environment. But there's a lot of trade-offs. It's great to not have to sit in traffic for an hour and a half 2 times a day to go 5 miles. I mean, that's you can't beat that. And I'm looking forward to embrace a sort of hybrid working environment once things are fully back to normal. So you get the best of both worlds, hopefully.
No, I completely share, both in terms of some of the benefits, but also, as a teacher, I enjoy the opportunity to be in a classroom. I enjoy the fact that I can see my students, I can see their facial expressions and understand whether they're learning or not. And if they are not catching up, I can slow down. I can try to adapt. But I completely agree also on the just the commute side of things. It sometimes it's wonderful not to have to sit in the car for hours and hours. Coming to you, Brigham, again for Eversana, and on the so Hussein mentioned the pace of research and pace of drug development as one potential. How do you see the impact of the pandemic on the work that you are doing, and also, as you think about ways that we can accelerate drug discovery and development, and even some of the efforts around clinical trial, do you see certain lessons that we have learned that would potentially stay with us?
Yeah, I think we're living in a different world than we were a year ago. I mean, that's true across our lives, right? But certainly in the regulatory sense, and I think in the drug development sense. And, it's a couple ways. I mean, we've proven we can do this fast if we need to, right? I have customers and colleagues who are not in vaccine development, who are now hearing from their patients, why is it 7 years to get a Parkinson's drug? Right? If you can do a vaccine in 6 months, and I think you've actually got an FDA body. That's my daughter, Henrietta, who's joined me for last year on these types of Zooms. But, you've got a regulatory body that I think is open to ideas, is digital foot forward, and, is really thinking about the evolving landscape. And I'll highlight a couple. So, first and foremost, I think if we look at trial design and recruitment, people are looking for new models there. They're looking for, adaptive trial designs that make better use of data as it's coming in quickly to help optimize dosages, optimize cohorting and statistical approaches. And that's much more dynamic than it used to be in the conversation with regulators. So it used to be, you kind of submitted your packet and hope they said yes. And there's much more of a conversation now. And I think that type of thing can speed things up on its own. I think related to that, and this connects to the data world, people are looking at decentralized clinical trials and virtual trials, which sort of became a necessity last year because, we had people who didn't want to go into sites and, wanted to be able to participate, but on their own terms. I also think it's related to, the sort of digital footprint in the rest of our lives. Patients are asking, I'd say rightly so, why can't I participate in this trial from an app, right? Or from can you ship me the kit to do the blood testing and, do the adherence monitoring and whatnot, right? And the thing is, the tech is there. There's a number of great companies that are working in that space. So the potential of that is that, you're no longer tied to a physical location to do a trial. It means you can enroll quickly and easily. You can be maintained on the trial safely and monitored appropriately. And the data is not something you wait to gather, it is sort of continuously gathered. Where this gets really exciting is that will definitely increase participation in trials, both in general and from underprivileged populations. I mean, sadly, usually trials are run at the highest price, most expensive institutions. Not everybody can get to Memorial Sloan Kettering. Not everybody has the insurance to go to one of these major places. And just by decentralizing, I think we'll expand the footprint and give a better voice to a broader set of the population. I also think, and this goes to my final point on the change, if we imagine that app-based sign up for a trial, do it from home, I'm not saying we're 100% there, but let's just imagine that. What that means is that trials are becoming almost on the continuum of standard of care, right? So if you're a physician, you could write somebody a script for an approved drug. You could also write them a script for a trial, and they might go back and forth between those modes. And I think what you'll see, and this relates to the other thing we're seeing post-pandemic, there's this big change to how people are seeking care. The rise of apps like His and Hers or Noom, things like this, which are more suited to how we experience our digital lives. I think those avenues become a bigger part of the healthcare provider system. And within that, I think trials to treatments becomes kind of a continuum. And where I'm seeing this show up right now, and we deal with a lot with companies who are at phase 3 and launching their first drug, you really have to be planning for your launch during your trial, right? And you have to plan for your evidence that you're not only that your therapy is clinically relevant and safe, but also that it has value in a value-based healthcare system, right? So this is where data comes in. We're finding it used to be you kind of launch your drug and then a couple of years in, you try and do some studies to convince payers or doctors that it was better than something else. You got to do those up front now. And that's a big acceleration. I also think it's a good trend because now we're talking about wanting to make decisions based on not just small trials, but perhaps bigger, more decentralized trials that can continuously flow through to phase 4, include real world data, and then have that inform the value equation with what should be paid for and how much, which ultimately, there's one thing to get great efficacy out of a therapy. It's another thing to launch a therapy that patients can afford to use, right? And I think that's got to be part of the equation. And I think we're finding that data is really central to that discussion between payer bodies, providers, and figuring it all out. So I just feel like this old world of, there's R&D, right, way over here, and then we launch a drug and that's over here. That's coming together. And the common thread, I think, is going to be digital and data.
Great. Yeah, no, so again, looking at us at Northeastern and specifically as academics, we are involved in this wonderful ecosystem in the Boston area in drug development, pharmaceutical sciences, biotechnology, medical devices, all of the different areas that are very in close proximity to us. And so we are involved in a number of different efforts. One of our primary role is to develop the talent and continue to provide a basis for having human resources that can engage with different companies. And so I want to flip the question a little bit to you, each one of you, in terms of how can we be better at developing this talent pool that will not only for this year, but also to see that it will be malleable and ultimately provide you with a human resource that can benefit the workforce for many years to come. Hussein, maybe you can start with you. We already have some very innovative programs like the experiential PhD and postdoc, but is there anything else that you would see from your lens that Northeastern could do better?
Yeah, so first of all, I want to say that the programs that are in place at Northeastern could serve as role model for other universities also to follow, because these are such unique programs that causes the partnership between industry and academia. It not only helps the incoming students to get the real world experience, but also helps industry to gain access to the talent pool that they are looking for. So the programs like industrial PhD that we have, the postdoc program, both of them are for the students that are like springboard to their next career that they are looking for. In industry, like if I speak for my function, I'm in clinical pharm and pharmacometrics. There is tremendous gap between what is needed in industry and what is missing in the talent pool that is available to hire. So, and there are just a handful of universities that provide training in these niche areas. And Northeastern has a advanced pharmacokinetics course and the program in place. It is not like specific pharmacometrics program, but it just does have the framework to provide that introductory training. So what we are able to use is get students with that background and then train them up to a certain extent and bring them up to speed to the level that is needed. And these programs really help doing that. So what can be done is if there are several such niche areas where there is a gap in the talent pool out there, so a thorough analysis of what is the missingness in the talent and what are the educational gaps, and if you can come up with specific programs that would address those needs, and then use this industry collaboration to bring those students and talent so that you can have that symbiotic relationship so that both are benefiting. And that is how we have this postdoc program in place at Northeastern. So we are having going to get a postdoc. Javed is going to join, and we could find a very wonderful talent in him, which is expert in machine learning, AI. We look forward to employ him for pharmacometric modeling and use his expertise for translational PKPD modeling, system pharmacology modeling, and bridge our talent gap with what we is there in the world. Yeah.
Great, thanks. And Vincent, your thoughts on, you're already involved in the experiential PhD as a mentor from Synlogic perspective, as you think about employees who are going to be joining Synlogic and talent pool that you're seeking to build upon, how do you foresee Northeastern's role, and how can, is there any advice that you can give us?
I mean, I second Hussein, and I think that Northeastern is sort of top dog in getting people trained and what to anticipate moving to industry more so than what I've seen from other companies or from other, sorry, institutions. I've been lucky in some respect that I've always worked in discovery. So discovery science is always sort of the first thing to hit. So moving from an academic background into discovery science is not as big of a leap as jumping from maybe an academic background right into manufacturing or right into clin ops or something along those lines. So I think that I'm right in an area that's a easy transition for scientists coming from mostly a wet lab background. And I think that seeing that these programs exist, the experiential PhD that I'm taking my student through right now, he's already got some background in drug development, and now it's sort of the opposite. He's now worked in industry for a while, and he's seeing the difference between that and what it takes to get a PhD. I think that's a really unique take on things. We have hosted numerous Northeastern undergraduates as part of the internship program that you have for that, and I think that that's really been a really great tool for them. So much that we tend to just hire them right afterwards if they're not looking to go to higher education. So I would just commend you to continue to do what you're doing. I'm not familiar with all of the curriculum that you offer, but I'm sure if you could provide some sort of courses or panels like this on developing drugs, so from discovery, 10 years ago I never would have, or even 7 years ago when I started, I never would have understood how discovery science fits into a total IND package. Once you have a lead candidate, you go through candidate optimization and clinical candidate nomination, and then you have to worry about manufacturing. What are all the pieces? How do they fit together? You might already offer something like that, but I would say, knowledge of that, how everything just doesn't boil down to just the discovery part. It's all got to fit in. It's all part of a puzzle that fits together. Will be really helpful for people that really want to make an impact with drug development.
Right. Thank you, Vincent. Brigham, same question. Hussein touched a little bit also on and we are doing some wonderful things with the Rue Institute in the context of AI and machine learning. I know Eversana has a strong interest in that. As we start to develop some of these thought leaders in terms of bringing these advanced technologies out, where do you see the Northeastern's role in contributing to the next generation that will ultimately seek employment in companies like Eversana?
Sorry, if I have a little background noise for a second. Give me one second.
Yep.
Sorry, let me know if that's too much background noise. I'm trying to get them to turn it off. Yeah, look, I think where Vincent was going at the end there makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, when I think about, the opportunity that this program creates, two words that come to mind are context and curiosity, right? And Vincent was going there on context. I'm a product of the Northeastern co-op program. I mean, I got to go out and I'm in the industry I'm in because of my second co-op. There's no doubt about that. I work for a CRO in the Boston area. And the context part of this is, when you're doing a PhD or a graduate degree of some kind, you can get pretty heads down on your topic. And there's good things about that, like knowing, a topic inside and out, really thinking deeply about it, beating your head against the wall of frustrating experiments and figuring out ways around it. But understanding why you're doing what you're doing and why it's important in an industrial context, what businesses fit around it. I mean, if you think about like the beginnings of, CRISPR research, right? They were not about some of the great things that Moderna and others, have gone on to do, or an mRNA technology where that's being applied. It's like, if you think about where things start at the bench, understanding how industry would think about them and use them. Vincent mentioned, all the steps in the process around drug discovery. how to extend that into clinical development, and even understanding, if you can, how patient populations work in the real world. These are things that bring a lot of value for your next step, no matter what it is, right? Whether it's in academia or it's in industry or policy, right? So just be thinking about that, because I think this program creates a great chance to learn that piece and put what you're doing on the research side in context with the rest of the industry you're in. And the curiosity part, is just something, again, the cool opportunity here is, to find, while you're still doing this graduate work, to find and experience something that might be really interesting, you might be curious about, like, hey, I heard a lot about vaccine development last year, let's check that out. Or like, hey, I find myself doing a lot of data analysis, maybe there's some things I can uncover there, and use this as a chance to scratch that. Because I mentioned, my second co-op was the one that led to the career I've had. My first one was in the chemical industry, manufacturing concrete, and I decided I didn't want to do that, right? So like, both sides of the experience are interesting, and I would just use it to chase that curiosity and build context for what you're doing.
Great. Thank you, Brigham. I'm very sensitive to the time. So I know that Deanna had asked all the participants, if you have questions, please post them in the chat. But let me pass on to Jason. If there are questions, he'll look through them and ask those. But also just for closing remark, I just want to end by saying, we are incredibly proud of all of you guys and what you are doing. And as a Northeastern faculty, I cannot I'm just blushing to see how much you're contributing to the science out there. And so thank you so much for everything you're doing. And thank you so much for participating in this panel with us. And I hope that this discussions, have generally led to more questions and more engagements. So Jason, all yours.
Thank you. I see, just a comment or two in the chat. Given that we have about 1 minute left, I think we should probably wrap. And I just want to echo Mansoor's comments. It's been really inspiring to hear your stories about everything that you've gone on to do, really incredible accomplishments. And I would encourage anyone who's on, whether you're a student or a faculty member or a member of another organization, there's lots of ways to engage, to really tackle difficult problems together. And, we'd love to do that. So
feel free to connect on LinkedIn. Happy to connect with anybody.
There you go on LinkedIn.
Same here.
Excellent. Well, thank you all. Very, very generous of you. Thank you all for your time. I know you're all very busy. Thanks to everyone who attended, and have a great day.